live.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. We are the Historic Districts Review Board. We're having our August 9th meeting tonight, and I guess we start off with a roll call vote.
Yes, Chair Rios. She's excused.
She's excused, yes.
Thank you. Vice Chair Katz.
I'm here.
Member Beachide.
Here.
Member Bienvenu.
Here.
Member Guida.
Here.
Member Larson.
She has to be excused as well.
Okay, good. She's excused also.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have a quorum.
Okay, the first item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Any changes to the agenda?
Chair, we have a few changes. Start at the top. Item 2 under old business, that's case 2022-005346 HGRB. That one is postponed. Next item is number 6 under new business, 504 East Palace. That is case number 2022-005595 HGRB. That one is also postponed, and one more. Item number 8 under new business. So that's 2022-005471 HGRB. Also postponed.
Okay, may I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved. Each side.
Guida seconds.
Okay, may we have a roll call vote on that, please?
Yes, Member Beachide.
Yes.
Member Bienvenu.
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes of the July 26th meeting. Are there any changes to the minutes? Yes.
I have two, thank you. On page 19, third paragraph, please replace northwest with north, comma, west. And also on page 19, the seventh paragraph, please correct the spelling of admirable.
Other changes? Yes.
Thank you, Chair Katz. On page 15, under motion, in the third paragraph, where it says member Bienvenu has to clarify round vigas or none at all, replace round vigas with lumber cut, or actually replace round with lumber cut. On page 21, under motion, where it says member Bienvenu said the staff report pointed out, take out said the staff report pointed out, and replace with proposed a friendly amendment, and then delete the word record after main house and add the word contributing before the word designation. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any others? Might I have a motion to approve the amendments as amended?
Each side
minutes.
moves to approve the minutes from 7/26/2022 as amended.
Guida seconds.
Okay, roll call?
Member Beachide.
Yes.
Member Bienvenu.
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the findings of fact and conclusions of law. There are 3 of them. Does anyone have any changes to any of them? No? No? Nope. Okay. Might I have a motion?
Member Bienvenu moves to approve as submitted.
Guida seconds.
Okay, roll call, please.
Member Beachide.
Yes.
Member Bienvenu.
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda are matters from the public. Does anyone from the public wish to come forward and comment? Thank you, Stephanie. Good to see you.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Stephanie Venanato. I'm sort of patting myself on the back, but I did mention to you before about the library floor at La Posada, and I just decided to try to go up the chain, and found a responsive CEO at Remington Hotels has actually hired a local finish carpenter, master finish carpenter, to redo that floor and a few other floors on the first floor. So anyway, we do have somebody, a corporate partner, who actually cares about their historic asset and is going to do something about it. So I'm pretty excited that it was actually as simple as that. I thought I'd have to start a letter writing campaign or something. And I want to thank you, Frank, for being on the board for so long. I understand this is your last meeting, and I, again, appreciate your time and also your sensibilities. And I do want to point out again that there's still this fake green turf wall at Dinner for Two that says steak and cocktails and neon lights that separates them from their neighbors. But I'm really wondering how we approved a fake green sod wall there. And it's just attached to a fencing there. And the other thing is, we do have on Old Santa Fe Trail, we have Sarah Novison again advertising off-site. It took several years to get her signs away from that location, but now one of them has already come back only a few months after the signs were finally removed. So I'm bringing it to staff's attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Anybody else? Okay, moving on to staff communications. Carly?
Thank you, Chair. A couple things. One logistical item to start with. The Lincoln Avenue doors will be the ones that will be open in the future, and this one will not be opened. This was a request for security, among other things, but I want to make sure that's just known. That was told to me as of today, so we'll have a note on the door. Secondly, and it's very exciting, the appointments to the HGRB and reappointments are being presented to the City Council tomorrow. I'll leave part of the announcement to you, as it's already been alluded to. But we appreciate the service of this board greatly. It sets the standard for our community and our other boards. It's a high commitment, and there are some long nights, and they're important decisions. So I'm going to say we really appreciate Buddy's service. His seat is expected to be filled by Madeline Medrano Aguilar. And then Vice Chair, and then tonight Chair Katz is decided to step down, and his seat will be filled by Dr. Jennifer Berkeley. Would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, I would say a few words. I was appointed to the board in February of 2011, and that's a long time ago. And I have loved serving on the board. I think it's a very important organization. I very much appreciate the help of staff all these years. That we couldn't do without that, for darn sure. And I also appreciate my fellow board members throughout the years, and what a collegial, intelligent, hardworking group of people they are. Another group that I appreciate are the applicants, some of whom we see frequently, some of whom only come once in a while. But I do appreciate that they come willingly and helpfully and work with staff and everybody to get the work done and to preserve the look of Santa Fe and the feeling of Santa Fe. And I am hopeful. I fill the seat that is assigned to a member of the Old Santa Fe Association, and Jennifer Berkeley will be filling that seat. She's been a long-time member of the association and has done a lot of work on historic preservation, and in fact won awards for it. So you won't have me kick around anymore. No, you never did kick me around. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you.
I'm going to just add, Madeline Medrano Aguilar will be filling the seat that represents the construction industry. And then Flynn Larson is also not seeking reappointment at this point. And she hopefully will be able to join us until we have another person to fill the historian seat. So that has a newer development, and we'll be working very hard and quickly. She has been a very important member to this board. This is a very important seat, as each are, but this is the historic preservation, the historian seat. And she will be working on her master's thesis this fall, and so we wish her the best. So as you find other folks who are very interested, I'm sure this one will be, we'll have several hopeful applicants, and we'll post it on the website very soon. And that is all for staff communications.
Okay, thank you. We will then go on to our cases, and as usual, if one is dissatisfied with the decision of the board, you do have the right to appeal to the City Council. I think it's 15 days from the issuance of the findings of fact and conclusions of law, or 30 days from the decision announced if we don't get those findings out timely. So our first case, number one, is case 2022-005470 HDRB at 57 Old Santa Fe Trail. And Angela, you're up.
I just may make a quick announcement. For those folks who are in the Zoom, on Zoom, if they wish to speak on a particular case, have them raise their hand. We will do people who are in person and get their comments first, and then if there's an interested member of the public, then I will make sure that they speak after. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and everyone here. The first case tonight is 57 Old Santa Fe Trail. It is on our plaza. This photograph shows the street block of which this is a part. This is the east side of the plaza facing its west elevation. I will say that this is, for the record, case number 2022-005470. And I will now talk about subject site. This is a two-story commercial block building that was constructed in 1912 that fronts the plaza on its eastern elevation. It's designated contributing in its west elevation, its primary facade. In the 1950s, John Gamin remodel transformed the original Beaux-Arts classical revival style building into simplified Spanish Pueblo revival. Currently, it has a commercial storefront, windows on its ground floor, and a large, flat, windowless stucco wall that extends from the portal to its parapet. In the late 1960s, Meme designed portals around the plaza, which included this building. It was previously known as the First National Bank and later as Levine's Department Store. In 1954, the bank moved across the plaza to its current location and style at the northwest corner of the plaza. In 2011, exceptions were granted to install a building wall sign above the 15 feet height limit and to exceed the maximum 20-inch letter height. Currently, the applicant proposes to replace the existing wall-mounted sign on the west facade. And that's what you see here. Existing is on the left and proposed is on the right. The proposed sign will be 51% smaller than the existing sign area, with a maximum area of 34 square feet compared to the current 70 square feet. The letters will all be 24 inches in height, which is 3 feet shorter than the largest letter on the current sign. The sign will be mounted with the base at 17 feet 6 inches above street grade, which is the current mounting height. The proposed sign will be constructed of fabricated metal with 2-inch depth and will have a dark navy painted finish. There is no proposed lighting or transparency to the sign, and it will be mounted directly to the stucco wall. The proposed sign requires 3 exceptions to the signage requirements outlined in Article 14, 8.10, H26A little I. The sign area will exceed 20 square feet, the letter height will exceed 20 inches, and the sign will be mounted more than 15 feet above street grade. The applicant has provided responses to the exception criteria. And with that, I am concluding my report and stand for questions.
Thank you, Chair Katz. Angela, just a question about the calculation of the height above street grade. When it's, the code requires 15 feet or up to 15 feet, is that correct? Is that the height, the bottom of the sign, the middle of the sign, or the top of the sign?
Bottom of the sign, as I understand it.
Okay.
But if someone has a clarification on that, I welcome that.
I don't. But it seems, it's an ambiguity in the code, it seems to me. It's not defined.
Mhm.
So the height of the sign is allowed to be up to what under the code?
The height from
The sign itself.
the
or
sign
does it
itself
have a
is,
dimension?
the dimensions are, I believe, what is it, 20, what I just quoted our code. Maximum area in this case is 34 square feet. And you're asking what the maximum area,
No, I'm just
allowable?
trying to figure out how high the sign can be under our code.
Oh, in
It can
terms
be-
of-
The bottom of the sign can be 15 feet above grade according to your interpretation. How much higher can the entire sign be above street grade?
that is a question.
Okay.
I guess I would see it embedded in the regulations regarding the area of the sign, but, which is limited by that area limit.
Okay,
Chair Katz,
thanks.
if I may, there's a maximum 20-inch letter height.
That's a second ambiguity, right? Because we're talking about sign dimensions and height, and then we separately talk about letters. So it's just not clear to me how high a sign can be above the grade under our ordinance. In other words, I'm trying to figure out what kind of an exception is really being requested here from what would normally be the maximum permitted under the ordinance. But I understand you're not sure the answer yet either.
I'm doing some research and we'll get back to you.
Okay, sure, thanks.
Any other questions for Angela? And will the applicant come forward and get sworn in and present?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Lisa Gavioli with Jenkins Gavin, 130 Grant Avenue, Suite 101, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87501.
Good evening, Lisa.
Good evening. I'm just going to take a moment to switch out the laptop.
Okay, well, I will use that moment to say that Lisa is one of the people that I thank very much for their help, because Lisa was in the seat that Carly is sitting in now for quite a while, and she was an enormous help to us.
Grab that later. Sorry. Yep, very well. So I will be as brief as possible. So we're here tonight, this evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, to discuss the sign replacement at 57 Old Santa Fe Trail. The site, as Angela mentioned, is on the east side of the plaza, facing west. And we are in the downtown and east side historic district.
We have a request before you this evening for an approval of a wall-mounted sign to replace the existing sign at the exterior facade at 57 Old Santa Fe Trail. And as was mentioned, there are 3 exceptions that have been requested. The first exception is to 14-8.10 H26A1A, which requires the signage area to be no more than 20 square feet. The second is an exception to 14-8.10 H26A1B, which requires lettering height to not exceed 20 inches. And the third is an exception to 14-8.10 H26A1D, which requires that mounting height does not exceed 15 feet above street grade. And again, as you mentioned, there is some ambiguity there about whether that's to the bottom of the sign or to the top of the sign. We were assuming that it was to the top of the sign, so take that for what it will. I hope that our exhibits will help illustrate what we're talking about this evening. So again, we have the Plazascape, the west elevation of the plaza here, the Catron building on the left, the Lucchese former Levine's department store, former First National Bank building to the south of that, and then I believe there's a jewelry store on the corner now. I just wanted to point out that this building was originally constructed in 1912 as the First National Bank in a neoclassical style. It is, in my view, one of the most dramatic instances of a change from what was happening around the turn of the century to more of a push towards the proliferation of Santa Fe style. So just as a little memory there. And then we have some images of the Levine's department store as it appeared in 1954 when it was redesigned by John Galmeme. On the left, you see Meme's rendering, the concept that he had for the Levine's department store, and I want you to note the size of the lettering there, which is quite large, and actually larger than what ended up being put into that space. The space was designed to seat a sign, to seat a wall-mounted sign for a business in that location. And so you see on the right the resultant lettering that was placed on the wall for Levine's department store. We believe that sign was, well, I can get into some comparisons for what we believe that original Levine's department store sign was, but we believe that the lettering height was probably about 4 feet high at that time. Probably mounted around the same height that the Lucchese sign is mounted now. And I just also wanted to note that there is a provision in 14-5.2 that mentions that replacement or duplication of missing features can be substantiated by documentation or pictorial evidence. And although we're not replicating exactly a historical feature, the sign that is being proposed is quite close to that Levine's sign as it did materialize in 1954. So that's just a sidebar note. And here is a little mock-up that we did just by point of comparison, because we've done the existing sign in the same mock-up and our proposed sign in the same mock-up. This is what the Levine's lettering would look up in 2D representation. This is the existing sign as it looks today, as approved in January of 2011, with exceptions. The existing sign is 14 feet wide. The lettering at its maximum extent is 5 feet high. And the top of the lettering there is 21 feet high. So then if you do the math, then the bottom of the sign is at about 16 feet above street level. And again, just to simplify into a 2D rendering elevation drawing, there's the Lucchese sign. So Lucchese has gone through a rebrand, as businesses do. It's important to the life of a business to rebrand and refresh its image every now and then, and it's doing this at its stores all over the country. So this is just a little bit of branding material that reflects the new Lucchese brand. And you'll note the different color palettes that are there, with navy blue being the preferred color. This is the proposed sign in mock-up, similar mock-up, So the proposed sign is 17 feet wide with 24-inch lettering, so 2 feet high, as opposed to what exists now, which is 5 feet high. The top of the proposed sign at 19.5 feet, so the bottom of the proposed sign would be at 17.5 feet. And again, in this elevation drawing. We also did a mock-up of what we interpret a code-compliant sign to be. If we place, and again, we're assuming that the 15 feet was to the top of the sign. So if you place, 20-inch lettering at the mounting height specified in the area specified by the sign code, this is what you get. A sign that's not legible from the street and that's not readable, and it's not really appropriate for the space that was designed by MEME to hold a sign. And in terms of color, there was a mention in the staff report that the navy blue color that we proposed was not compatible with the downtown and east side standards. We'd like to point out that we're not really working from 14.5.2 here. We're working from the sign code, which is 14-8.10H. And in that code, it says that the effort of design of signs in the historic district is to keep a moderate, attractive, and compatible styling so as not to cause erratic or disturbing distractions from the architectural beauties of the city. And importantly, therefore, the color and design are left to the discretion of the applicant. And this is reflected in the myriad signs you see around the plaza in various different colors, which we've got a few examples here, the 5 and dime being orange, notably, Ortega's being turquoise and red. We've got, any color in the rainbow is represented in signs around the plaza, including navy blue, as you can see in the center photo, that Corsini and Spirit sign being navy blue and white. And just wanted to throw out a dimensional comparison of what was there historically in 1954 with Levine's department store, what the sign code requires, what was approved in 2011 under exception, and then what is being proposed today. So in terms of lettering height, we estimate the Levine sign had about 4-foot lettering height. The sign code, again, requires 20-inch lettering height. And what was approved in 2011 was a 5-foot lettering height. And what is being proposed this evening is a 2-foot lettering height. In terms of sign area, we estimate that the original Levine sign was about 96 square feet. The sign code, again, requires a maximum of 20 square feet. What was approved in 2011 under exception was 70, and what is proposed this evening is 34 square feet in area. And in terms of mounting height, and again, there's that discrepancy, so this is to the top of the signs. So we estimate that the Levine's sign is about 22.5 feet to the top of the sign. The sign code, again, specifies 15. What was approved in 2011 was about 21 to the top of the sign. And then what we are proposing this evening goes to about 19.5. And that concludes our presentation. We're happy to discuss exception criteria with you or stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Lisa. Questions of the applicant? There not to be any questions. So this is a public hearing, and if there's anyone from the public who would like to talk about this application, please come forward.
Good, how are you? Oh, that's good. You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is John Eddy. My address is P.O. Box 845, Tesuque, New Mexico, 87574. Thank you, Chair Katz and board members. This is a really interesting submission, and I really appreciate the detail that the applicant has put into their proposal here. It's very, very helpful. And it essentially, to me, comes down to aesthetics and subjective judgment, which is really difficult for you guys to deal with. But my take on this is that because of the change in the lettering, the proposed lettering of that space, the size of the lettering dominates the physical space that it is in. And as such, I think it takes away from the architectural integrity of that space, even though we all know that space was designed specifically to house a sign. The earlier sign is much more organic and is more like script, and it really disappears in that space, which I know is counterintuitive to someone who wants to market their building. But I think if the size of the type of their submission were lessened and that exception were not granted to exceed the size, I think that that sign would still have the effectiveness because of its lettering jumping out the way it does. It's very effective lettering. It's very easy to read. And I think that if it was a little bit smaller, it would still be very easy to read. So, thank you. I look forward to your discussion because I think it'll be interesting.
Thanks, John. Stephanie?
Stephanie, do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Stephanie Beninato, P.O. Box 1601, Santa Fe. I think really, if we're being sort of logical, that you would be calculating the height of the sign from the bottom. Because look at the plaza, they all have second stories, they all have portals, and when portals came and went, but with the portal, it's impossible to have a sign that's at the top of it is 15 feet. That makes a lot more sense that really you're talking about the bottom of the sign being 15 feet. And it is smaller than the existing sign, but the existing sign was an exception. And I agree with John Eddy that, you know, if the letters were slightly smaller to the 20 inches as opposed to the 24 being proposed, that it would be slightly less dominant. And I think it is very striking, and I think it definitely dominates that space. And I think, I mean, again, it's a sign. I think that's the purpose of the sign. But again, I'm not sure that you have to grant a slightly larger type, I'll just call it a type, because I think 20 inches will get everyone's attention. And I do hope that they're not proposing to re-stucco it to that light color. I would really be opposed to that. And again, I think, is that blue, is that the blue they're going to be using? Is that what it's really going to look like on the building? So those are my questions. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Okay. Lisa, do you?
Nobody has raised their hand on Zoom as well.
Lisa, do you want to respond to any of the comments on the?
Thank you, Chair Katz. I don't really have anything specifically to respond to, just that it feels like the comparison should be the historic condition, not what is there presently, because what is there presently was granted by exception. And I think it's also important to note that John Gaumim installed a sign that wouldn't have met our code either. And he did a lot of things that would not have met our code. But I think if we're here to honor the history of Santa Fe, then that has to hold some weight.
Let me
Thank
ask
you.
a question.
Oh, yes.
And, one of the things that's puzzled me about the discussion of the size of the sign is that obviously the letters in the sign that's currently there are quite a bit smaller than the letters on the sign that's proposed. And so when you say the area of the sign, you sort of draw a box around it and take the tallest part of it and say that's the whole height of it, and I think that does not fairly represent the sign, which is why I think we look at the one on the right as seeming large as comparison. Would you consider the possibility of reducing the size by 4 inches so you don't need that 20 exception from the 20-inch rule?
Can you hold on just 1 minute?
Just to confirm, the maximum height is 15 feet to the top of the sign, and we acknowledge that not one size fits all, so that's why we have an exception process.
The client would not be amenable to reducing the letter height, unfortunately. They really feel that this is what's appropriate for the space and for the brand.
Okay, thank you. Okay, coming back to the board, are there discussions, questions? Member Guida.
Thank you, Chair Katz. Just a few thoughts about the application. I'm really grateful for the clarity of the applicant's presentation, the explanation of the history, and my biggest takeaway from what's been presented and what's been discussed is that our ordinance is actually working to produce a considered response in a sign in our most important civic space. We have a set of rules in our ordinance that prescribe certain conditions, and of course, as Heather just mentioned, we have an exceptions process. I think, to me, the thing that we should move forward with is not the letter of the law on this side, and we know that that's actually impossible to have a sign whose top would be at 15 feet, but actually consider the exceptions that are being presented here. And the one that's the most powerful to me, and the one that I think, is a place where the intent of our code and the applicant's response intersect is in the idea that this is an important building on the plaza. This is a space created for a sign. This is a mid-century facade that was associated with the department store that I think is really important to preserve on the plaza. And I think that the applicant's response here, both the existing sign and their new rebranding sign, both kind of fit the bill in terms of maintaining the look of that 1950s building, which creates diversity and is a record of history in Santa Fe. I am overwhelmingly in favor of the project as proposed.
May I take a moment to read the specific language of the code?
Thank you.
That very helps an important record. We're looking at 14-810. This is the subsection H, which is specific to the whole historic special sign regulations in the H district. Subsection 26 regarding wall signs. There's an area limitation which has 4 subsections, but with respect to the height under subsection A1D, the code reads, no sign shall be permitted 15 feet or more above street grade, measured in front of the facade where the sign is to appear. Regarding projection wall height from ground under subsection B, it reads, no wall sign shall project more than 3 inches beyond the building line. However, if the sign is attached to the wall at a height of not less than 6 feet 8 inches measured from the sidewalk or ground to the bottom of the sign, it may project a maximum of 10 inches. So, apparently the higher the sign is off the sidewalk, has a bearing on how much it projects. If the sign is attached to the wall at a height of not less than 6 feet 8 inches, the sidewalk or ground to the bottom of the sign may project a maximum of 10 inches. This, of course, is built at 6 feet. That's what I'm looking at. Then there are specifics regarding the area. 26A, little 1, large A, the maximum allowable size is 15% of the facade on which the sign is to be placed. In no case shall the sign area exceed 20 square feet except in the AC and RAC districts, where the maximum allowable size is 6 square feet. This is not the
AC or RAC district, right? B, maximum size of letter shall be 20 inches in height, except in the AC and RAC districts. There should be no restriction on the number of letters, words, or lines of any sign, so long as it's over all areas within the maximum allowable square feet.
If there's one observation that I might make is that the reference is to street grade, so that is not the base of the building. There is about 3 to 4 inches of curbing there, sidewalk. The street is a little lower.
Yeah, just a few comments. I think that the comparison to the building's history and its current design, which has existed for at least 50 years, is a really strong argument in favor of this proposal. The space was designed for a sign. I like the continuity that is kept by preserving a sign in that space. And I think I'd just like to clarify, I don't believe an exception is required at all for the color, which is single color, which is represented elsewhere in around the plaza and in the district. But I think all other exception criteria have been met, consistent with the exception that was granted in 2011 for the current sign.
Thank you. Member Bienvenu?
Thank you, Chair Katz. So just to muddy the history a little bit, I guess two things. I have seen drawings, meme drawings of this renovation that show the upper floor as glass. I do think the original intention of meme was that the second floor was plate glass. I don't know where it turned into a blank wall with a sign, but that seems to have been an afterthought. Secondly, I don't know how long that sign actually was up there when it was Levine's. Does anybody know? I assume it was taken down in 1976, and every photograph I've ever seen of that building in the 80s, 90s, and up until this sign was put in, just show a blank wall. Does anyone have any other information? So I don't think historically we need to think that that is the original design or the historic design of that particular structure. I think that the signage that exists now, in my mind, was a mistake. I think it stands out on the plaza as billboard-like. I think the new one is actually an improvement, so I appreciate that. I think it's less strikingly a logo and just a little bit more of a wayfinding sign, as the application indicated. I do still, though, think it's too big. I think that the color is fine and it fits your branding. And as you pointed out, there's plenty of similar signage in the area with very similar color scheme. And as also pointed out, I don't think an exception is required for color. But I do think that there's no discernible reason why the sign needs to, the letters need to exceed the height limitation in the ordinance. You're asking for larger for reasons that escape me. I think that the sign can be read from the plaza and from the street very easily if it were smaller, but still at the height that you have it. So I would be in favor of an exception for the height, because I understand that that portal is a problem when you're looking at upwards from the street level, and also that this will help center it, the signage, better in the space that exists if it was higher than allowed under the ordinance. But I would, in my mind, the solution would be to have the height such that it's centered and visible from the street, but that the height of the sign, but that the height of the letters and the general square footage of the signage be consistent with the ordinance.
Lisa looks like she wants to say something.
It's possible to respond, Mr.
Sure.
Just to give, I believe the intention of the lettering size and the area that is proposed is to have a sign that's proportionate to the space that was designed to hold a sign. And I mean, we do have a rendering from Meme himself that showed a sign in that location. So whether it was the original intent or not, it was the final intent, and it was what was executed. So I do think it's important to honor that history again. So, thank you.
Thank you. Member Guida.
Mayor Katz, I'd like to make a motion. Case 2022-005-470 HDRB 57 Old Santa Fe Trail. I move that the board approve the application as submitted, finding that the exception criteria for letter height, sign area, and mounting height have been met.
Table second?
Okay, might we have a roll call vote, Melissa?
Member Beachay?
Yes.
Member Bienvenu?
No.
Member Guida?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the vote is 2 yes, 1 no. The motion has been approved.
Is that correct? Is the 2 votes sufficient?
It is. This matter came up when you were the acting chair, and there were 3 voting members. 2 to 1 passes.
Excellent. Then the motion has passed. The application is approved, and we look forward to the new sign. Moving on to the next case, case number 2022-005473 HDRB on 127 and 127.5 East of Vargas Street. And it's Angela's case.
Thank you, Chair. Moving right along. This property you saw at the last meeting. This is the Cider Press building. You read the case number. It is, at the last meeting, the Cider Press building, as well as the storage garage that's in the lower right photo, were designated contributing, along with the east and north river rock walls. And the proposal tonight is to add a new storage building on the southeast corner of the lot. This is the lot, and we're talking about the southeast corner. There is the site for the proposed building. Site plan. The applicant proposes to construct a 600 square feet storage building in that site, and the building will be Spanish Pueblo Revival style. It'll have a low slope roof, raised parapet, vigas posts, and a double wood door. The portal on it will be similar to the existing studio. It will have round wood posts, squared wood beams that will be stained medium brown, and will also be similar to the studio's exposed wood. The portal underneath will have a double wood plank wood door without trim, and the opening will have a bull-nosed detail. Doors will be finished in medium brown to match the posts and beams, and that would be chestnut transparent stain. The applicant also proposes to construct a window feature with non-operable wood shutters to break up the blank wall effect on that side. Trim will match that of the existing buildings, turquoise blue, and it will be stained medium brown, and stucco will match the existing Cider Press main building. Cementitious El Rey adobe. No other changes to existing buildings and yard walls are proposed. Staff recommends approval of the proposed project, finding that it complies with Section 14-5.2D, the general design standards for all historic districts, and 14-5.2E, the downtown and east side design standards. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Carly, did you have something?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to note for our minutes and the record that we've got non-contributing in the case caption, and that should be contributing. I just want to make sure our administrative record is correct.
I would ask the board to note the bottom picture there and where the posts are with regard to the roof. That will come up later in a different case. Okay, the applicant, please come forward and tell us what you want to tell us.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address.
Dale Zen, P.O. Box 756.
Good evening, Dale. Welcome.
Good evening. I would like to say that despite people being appointed to place in your chair, you are irreplaceable.
Thank you.
I think the square footage is 240 square feet. I think that was the studio building. So the actual square footage proposed is 240 square feet. The studio building that's adjacent is 600 square feet, I think, close to it. I have only one small change that I don't think anybody would object to is I'd like to lower, sorry, usually not speaking too quietly. In proportions of this building with the existing building, I'd like to lower it to 10'6", which matches the existing studio. It just gives a better proportion to the building, and it doesn't harm its usefulness. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Chair.
Any questions for the applicant from board members? Mr. Guida.
Yes, just one quick question. What happens when you lower the overall height to 10'6"? Does the
Porch wall would have to come down also.
the same amount, a foot? Okay.
It's basically 1 foot.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. Anyone from the public wish to come forward and comment? Seeing no one, comes back to the board. Yes, Member Bienvenu.
Unless there's any further discussion, I'll make a motion. In case number 2022-005473, HDRB, address 127, 127 and a half East of Argus Street, I move that the proposed project be approved pursuant to staff's recommendation and the information presented tonight.
I assume you are intending to have it as revised by the applicant.
As revised, of course, yes.
Each I will second, and just a friendly amendment that the applicant noted that the height would be reduced to a total of 10 feet 6 inches, and that the drawings should be revised accordingly and submitted to staff for approval before seeking a permit.
Accepted.
May we have a roll call, Melissa?
Member Beechag?
Yes.
Member Bienvenu?
Yes.
Member Guida?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving to the next case. This is case number 2022-005631, HDRB at 342 Plaza Ballantine. And this is a request for a primary facade designation.
Here we have a blank screen, so I am going to check on our IT folks. Same computer. All right, so this is case number 2022-005631 HDRB. We've seen this before. It's 342 Plaza Ballantine in the downtown East Side Historic District. I'm going to make a very brief overview, because this is coming up for a second look at the primary facades. As requested by the applicant and board. One of the main issues I think we've seen is that we've detoured away from the way primary facades were being designated in many years past. After doing a fair amount of research, primary facades were often designated mostly by the elevations. Only in recent years did that switch to doing very individual facades. I think this is a really important piece because oftentimes we include as much of an elevation or corner as we can, so we include context. Now, this was presented by a former staff member where we had a variation of facades around the building as primary. I took a longer look and more research into why designating a primary facade might have been done this way, and then how it should be revised. That said, this is the former map of the primary facades, and you can see on the house we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 facades that are designated primary. Now, in your packet, you see the case laid out for the west facade being, most of the west facade being made as primary. Now, facade number, or west elevation, excuse me. You see 18 is not highlighted as part of that initial request that the board approved. So, in my opinion, it became really only reasonable to narrow this down to a portion of the west facade, partially because the west facade captures more of that vernacular growth. The rule of protecting within 10 feet would protect a portion of that west facade up north, but that northern facade number 18 shows the massing, which is in the non-historic window. So the case for that is really low. Facade number 16 has that historic portal, and then facade number 12 has a window and door pattern that is repeated on the other side. And that picture window, and the windows are, the windows themselves are not historic. So here are the photographs of the north portion down in that lower left-hand corner, the central portion where the portal exists, and then that southern portion is a little harder to see. Staff also acknowledges that by having 7 facades that are nominated around the building, that's the only reason we would ever go towards that direction if something is borderlining on significant, and that's when we should see that many facades, if we have such a hard time determining whether it's contributing versus significant. And so in this building, while it still meets the definition of contributing, it does not come that close to significant to warrant that. That said, we'll go back to the facade diagram. On the house, this would be removing several facades, including number 4, number 9, number 10, number 11. And I think I'm missing one there. But it would be the others that are not a part of the house would remain. So the designation would be for designating facades number 12 and 16 on the west elevation as primary, and then to maintain the facades number 20, 24, 27, and 28 as primary. And I'm ready to answer questions regarding this case.
Could you talk to us about 4?
Number
Is
4.
4 the whole wall?
So 4 is the wall of the building, just the wall of the house. Now, it does connect to the, it connects to a historic wall, but you can see that this addition came along in the 70s, so it was a much later addition right here. The house grew to the east, and so that is one case for to maybe not be a part of this. That said, it does connect to the historic yard wall. So that's something for the board to consider. It does have that character defining yard wall into building piece. So it is a later portion of the house, but that being said, it being such a later piece with a portion of that being in the 70s, that's the reason for that.
Thank you. Any questions for Carly? Seeing none, the applicant will come forward and enlighten us, I hope, get sworn in.
Yes, I sure will. Please raise your right hands. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimonies you're about to give are the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address when you approach the podium.
Thank you, Chair Katz, Vice Chair Katz, members of the board. Joseph Carnes, Summer Carnes and Associates, P.O. Box 2476, Santa Fe 87504. Initially, I would like to thank staff for working with us following the last hearing at which this was considered to focus on the primary facades initially. We appreciate staff's recommendation. We agree with it, and we'll be happy to stand for any questions you have on this portion of the application. Thank you very much.
Questions? Okay. The public hearing, anyone from the public wish to comment on this portion of the case?
Stephanie Benanato. I'm deeply distressed about the development at Plaza Valentine. It always seems like whenever anybody wants, so let's just do it. Doesn't matter that they bought the house knowing what they got or what was already designated. And basically, you're preserving facades on outbuildings and a wall, but not much on the actual house itself. And I know that some of the windows may be newer, but the openings, I believe, are primary. And I would really urge you to look at what is really characteristic of this building that contributes. And I think it has to be more than just these two facades. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
My name is Ross Nelson. My address is 345 Plaza Valentine. I wasn't going to comment, but I did want to respond to the lady that just spoke to say that my wife and I purchased our home on Plaza Valentine about 3 years ago. We were fortunate enough to purchase our home after it had been remodeled. It was remodeled in a very sensitive manner and fits in with the entire street. As many of you know, the street has some very historic elements to it because of the previous owners of the street. And the street has been very, very sensitively redone and updated so that it can be appreciated by people for many years to come, as opposed to melting into the ground. And the work that's being proposed on 342, I believe, is very much in keeping with the Santa Fe style, as well as preserving the building so that it doesn't fall apart. And in addition, for those of you that have walked along Plaza Valentine, you'll know that from the street, actually, you can't see any of 342 except for the top brick coping because it is on a lowered property. So from Plaza Valentine, if you look over the wall, all you can see is the very top of the brick coping on part of the facade. So it's not visible from the street, and yet what they're proposing to do, we believe, will actually highlight the significant elements of the structure and preserve it so that it will contribute not only to the entire city, but to Plaza Ballantine.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the public wish to talk? Okay, the applicant.
Thank you, Vice Chair Katz. If I could just respond briefly, I neglected to mention that I'm here tonight with Zach Lawrence, one of the owners of the property. His wife, Julia Platt Lawrence, is out of state. But I wanted to respond to the initial public comment by pointing out that when Zach Leonard, purchased the house with Julia, the house was contributing, but primary facades had not been designated. That happened earlier this year, as you know.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, coming back to the board, Member Guida.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Anyone have any?
I'm sorry.
Oh, you have.
There's an attendee in Zoom that would like to speak.
Oh, excellent. I'm sorry, I forget. I get so used to live people.
Right. It is Charlie and Teresa Niemeyer. You can unmute. Thank you. State your name and address for the record, please. Sorry, we cannot hear you. Do you see that you're speaking? Can we hear you now? Yes. Please proceed.
You just swear her in, excuse me?
Good. You need to get sworn in. Hold on a sec.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Did you hear that?
Okay, and will it only be you speaking or your husband as well? Thank you.
Please proceed.
And thank you again to Getz and the board. I really actually was participating this evening. We didn't realize that there had already been a presentation on the property. We are the neighbors to the west, and so the wall dividing our property and 342 Plaza Ballantine is a shared wall between each of us. So our perspective is a little different because our backyard faces the property. In respect to the presentation this evening, I guess my question would be in reference to the primary facade and elevation number 28. That was one of our questions. When we reviewed the drawings, there wasn't any indication of what the intention was for the either salvation or renovation of that primary portal. That's a very old decorative portal with a kiva in the corner, and the reference to the elevation is primarily a parapet. So it was a question of ours as to what the intention was of that element, which seems to be significant in reference to a primary elevation this evening. That was one of the questions that we had. And the others that we had, which may not be anything that we can bring up at this point, is we would like to know where the condenser units are being planned to be located, because the back of our property is our bedrooms, and our hope is that they're not going to be up against that west wall, because they'd be very disruptive to us in our bedrooms and our rear patio in the evenings with doors open, and also during the day if we're trying to have some peace and quiet. The other third item that we had as a question was where the primary power service is to the property and where the telephone pole is located to receive the service. Since the house is increasing in footage, it's important to us. We know there's an existing pole in the northwest corner, which is where our walls come together, that is simply a relay currently for communication wires, but not any active power lines. And we are concerned about any power lines that may be run that may be behind our property. So we'd like to understand that as well. And the last item that we had is in the drawings, we could not tell what the material was going to be for the patio that's referenced between the existing casita structure and the shared wall to the west. Our concern being that it simply does not become a concrete pad where trash cans and other things might be stored, because we've had a 10-year history previously of the owner having a shed that was there that housed raccoons. So we've been dealing with a raccoon problem. We just don't want to end up with anything that's going to be stored on that patio that would create a similar situation. So we kind of wanted to understand what the intent of the patio is.
Okay, all of your questions go to what they're going to do with the house. And what we're dealing with in this case are which facades are primary. And so
Okay.
The applicant has been making careful notes about what you asked about, and when we get to the next case, he will answer your questions.
Okay, perfect. So the only one I think that pertained was the issue on the Portal, because that is, I think, elevation number 28, and which is the most significant portion of a contributing elevation. So I think that was the only question that does pertain to the facades.
Well, that elevation is going to, they're asking that it be primary, and so if they're going to do anything with it, that would be the next case.
Okay, very good, because it wasn't clear in the drawings that it was being addressed at all. So it'll be forthcoming, is what you're saying.
It will be primary elevation. It will be, it won't be changed. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you for the package. It was very, very thorough. We appreciate it.
Okay. Member Guida.
In case 2022-005631 HDRB 342 Plaza Valentine, I move that the board approve the status and designated facade recommendations per staff report. Those are facades 12, 16, 20, 24, 27, and 28 as primary.
Each have a second?
We have a roll call, Melissa.
Member Beachside?
Yes.
Member Bienvenu?
Yes.
Member Guida?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. Okay, we now move to case number 2022-005161 HDRB at the same address, and this is what they propose to do with this contributing building.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to pick up where I left off, kind of in sequence here. All right, so we have about a little over 700 square foot addition to the main house is being proposed. We have the addition to the north end, and we have kind of an infill piece to the southeast end there. And those are some of the largest changes that we're looking at, and really programmatically that change to enter the house from the east side. Sorry, I did not do the announcement I always do. This is case number 2022-005161 HDRB. Okay, here's the, just want to make sure we don't skip over this. These are the changes to the casita. There's no exception being requested around the casita or the carport, but there's the plans proposed and existing. Okay, here we're looking at the north elevation. We're looking at several window changes. And then there's that addition that appears on the north end. Okay. Now, as we're walking around to the east side of the house, this is that east elevation that changes the entrance to the house. And then as you back out, this is where you would see just beyond the wall. You're looking at the wall and the house beyond. So there's the gate addition there that's being proposed. Now, go back to my exceptions here. Okay, so our main exceptions that we're looking at are addition within 10 feet of the primary facade, and here's where that south elevation is. Note that there's some ironwork detailing over here and a gate attached to the house there. These are 3 sets of French doors infilling the windows on the south side and making new openings. Okay, in this west elevation, so this is where we're looking at the primary facades. This is, so you can see that the openings and the openings for the doors and windows would remain. There would be an increase to the parapet height, an opening change here, so that would be adding a new opening, and then the replacement of the portal here. Windows changes, and you're seeing the north addition there. So this is where most of the exceptions come into place, and there are for making a new opening and for addition to or within 10 feet of her primary facade, and then that replacing of that portal. Now, the other exception was for the gate, making that new opening in the gate that you saw over here. Okay. Here's the proposal for the carport. We're looking at the side. There's a little portal added to that, and the elevations around the casita. Okay. And then if we want to see materials, I can pull that up out of the packet as well. But this is from there. Let me just make sure I cover some of those last couple items. The ground HVAC will be ground mounted behind the walls and not publicly visible. All portals will have brick floors. The house will have colonial white wood windows. The exterior of the house will be buckskin stucco, which will closely match the exterior stucco that exists now. And then the gates are wrought iron. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the applicant, unless there are questions for me.
I don't believe so at this time.
Thank you again, Vice Chair Katz, members of the board. Again, I want to express appreciation for the opportunity to work with staff. We have worked hard to preserve the west facade, as Carly mentioned, facades 12 and 16, leaving those substantially as is. I just wanted to say a few words about the portal. That's the one area that we weren't on the same page with respect to Carly's recommendation. I want to point out that the existing portal decking is pointed out, and this is the portal that we want to expand to the west of facade 16, and that's what my pictures address. The HCPI indicates that the existing portal decking is not historic. If you look at the photo of the elevation of the portal and facade 16, you can see that the existing portal is between 4 and 5 feet wide. It has minimal functionality, and the real basis for the request to expand the portal farther to the west is the applicant's desire to achieve a usable portal. I'll also, on the other photo, the detail, it's at the upper left-hand corner of the portal as you're looking at it today. That's a photo we took recently. You can see that the portal was not built properly or is very well designed. I think that is properly taken into account. The proposal would replace the portal with a properly constructed larger portal. And I'll also point out that the portal is not visible from any public location. working on these revisions, as I said, the applicant committed to maintaining the sanctity of the western facades 12 and 16 to the extent feasible, and we would submit that the portal expansion would not change or detract from the west facade. The facade would remain as is substantially. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Mr. Martinez wants to respond to the questions that we received earlier from the applicant. We'll stand for any questions. Thank you all.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Would there be a way that this photograph that Mr. Carnes presented to the board can be placed on the screen so that the public can see it? We have Mr. Carnes referring to, I know all the board members have this, but I'm concerned that.
Hello, Chairman, board members. I want to respond to the questions of the neighbor. Oh, I'm sorry. Richard Martinez, P.O. Box 925, Santa Fe, New Mexico. First of all, the electrical service existing and the one that we're going to leave it where it is. It exists on the east side of the property, not by the pole that the neighbor was talking about. We will have ground-mounted mini splits, but those will not be near the wall that she was concerned with.
Where are they going to be?
They're going to be around the house, not on the west side of the property, because there is no heated or cooled space there, and so we will. They will be on our property, but they won't be against the wall that she was concerned with. And also, it is true that we have a patio behind the casita, which is on the other side of the wall where their yard is, but that patio will not be used for storage. It's for the enjoyment of the owners. We have a door on that side of the casita, so that we can use that patio as a little private space for the casita. We're also planning to do no work except restoration as necessary for the old portal, the mirador, as I would say, because it's a portal that is not attached to the house.
Thank you very much. That really helps.
I just want to point out on the picture that Carly is putting up on this sketch right now, on the screen right now, that's the portal that exists over that facade 16. And as you can see, it consists of a beam that is sideways, because the headroom is so low that you couldn't fit the beam the way that it should be, and that's why it's wider than it is tall. And then above that are 2x4s, not vigas or anything like that. And then above that is some unfinished wood, and we're proposing that all that would go away, and that the portal would actually be to the other side of the window, which you can barely see a little part of in this photograph, so that we can use it both for the kitchen that exists right inside this door. The barbecue and eating table will be under this portal.
Do we have drawings of the portal you're proposing?
Yes, it's in the packet.
In the packet. Thank you. Okay, Member Guida, I believe, has questions for the applicant.
Thank you. Richard, I really appreciate the drawings and the thoughtfulness in the design. If we were to look at the west elevation, I think what's clear to me is that the new opening in that southern mass, in emulating the existing window that's already there, I think is a kind of very sensitive addition to this. I know that the new portal that's on the south side of the building, the short end of it, will be visible on the west facade, but it is differentiated in plane. It's not 10 feet back, but it's certainly clear that it's not, that it differentiates itself from that facade.
It's back some, yes.
Yeah.
It's not a continuation.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I even think the raising of the parapet, too, is also something that's being done in a way that's consistent with this house that has kind of evolved rather informally over time. When we get to the portal, though, I think, my only concern really is about these columns. It's very clear that you're recreating the portal roof and extending it outward from the building, and, the way it looks in the drawings, it appears to be done in a way that's consistent with what's there now, what I think this board has found is the kind of most attractive feature of the main house. The addition of these kind of territorial style columns seems to me out of place for that facade. What we're recognizing as a kind of very informal type development over time there. And so, to me, my only objection would be the elimination of those posts, and I'm wondering if it's possible for that to happen and for that portal to still be supported by a beam that's pocketed into the two walls on either side.
Yes, that is possible. I haven't talked to the owner, and I will. The columns that you're talking about happen all over the place. This is not an isolated event. This is part of it, and the intention was to replicate the territorial style that is highlighted by the existing brick coping on the building itself. But it is possible. I think it is possible to do the portal without columns. Yes.
Good. I just think that it would be more consistent with what we're seeking to preserve about that facade.
Yeah, I can understand that. And across the way, this is looking at the Mirador, which does not have territorial columns. And so I can understand that. Yes.
Okay, and to me, the other exception, which is the entry opening in the contributing wall, I think that's being done in a very sensitive manner. I see, you're replicating some of the brick coping details that are part of that wall. You're just providing us with a taller gate entry.
That was my intention, and also, we're creating a new entryway because right now you go inside and around the house, which is inconvenient, and then you go through the door under this portal that we're talking about into a hallway right now. But my intention was to fit into the wall that's existing, the historic wall, and also to make the opening visually open. So that's why I was proposing an iron fence rather than a wooden gate, so that you could have that open.
Good. And I guess the last point I'll make is that these changes, while we can have a discussion about changes being sensitive to features of the house that we recognize as contributing and important, I think the kind of additions to this house are consistent with the way that this property has evolved over time. So I'm a fan of the proposal.
Other questions for the applicant? Okay, this is a public hearing. If someone from the public wishes to talk, please come forward.
Stephanie Stephanie Benanato. I don't think the 3 French doors really go with that house. I think it really overwhelms that particular facade. And again, it doesn't seem to work with any of the other facades. Getting it that this portal, I thought the portal was on facade 16 that they were adding on to. And again, an 8-foot portal as opposed to a 5-foot portal. I don't know, just a barbecue outside, we should give an exception. So if somebody can barbecue outside, it seems a little bit much. And I know it has a wall around it, but walls are not permanent, and you are not supposed to consider, well, you can't see it, so therefore you could do whatever you want. And I think that's really important to keep in mind in these types of cases. Also, mini splits, they're my favorite et noir, in that they're very loud and they are very disturbing. And I heard it was going to be, though, on the near 16 on that primary facade. So I would like to know, in relation to the primary facades, where the mini splits are going to be. I think we should really look at mini splits, not you, this board, but the council, in terms of screening them to some extent, so we don't have to see them on top of roofs and we don't have to hear them coming out of other people's yards. But that's a whole other discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to talk? Okay, that would close the public hearing. Comes back to the board. What's your pleasure?
Mr. Katz, I'd be happy to make a motion.
Please.
Case 2022-005161, HTRB 342 Plaza Valentine. I move that the board approve the project as submitted, noting that the exception criteria have been met for all changes to primary facades and inclusive of the portal on the west facade, with the only direction to the applicant to be to eliminate the territorial posts that are proposed for the west facade, the portal on the west facade.
I will second that. Is it clear in the motion that that is a condition of approval, that the post be removed?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Might we have a roll call vote, please?
Member Beachside?
Yes.
Member Bienvenue?
I vote no, and I should have made this comment before the motion was made. The only reason is because I do think that these changes are so significant that this would cause the building, in my mind, to lose its contributing status.
Member Guida?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the next case, number 2022-005596, HDRB at 1000 Canyon Road. And it looks like Angela has that case ready to present to us. Thank you, Angela.
Good evening again. Case number 2022-005596, HDRB, is about 1000 Canyon Road, which is a contributing building in the downtown East Side Historic District. And this is a primary facade designation case. This home is 850 square feet. It's a one-story, long and narrow adobe structure that was built between 1929 and 1934, designated contributing. It is a simple rectangular residence built in the Spanish Pueblo vernacular style with a flat roof, metal canales, adobe walls, and a rounded parapet. It sits on the east property line of the driveway easement that leads to the neighboring houses up south of the lane. This is the east elevation. Excuse me, south. No, east. Yes, east. Its front entrance faces Canyon Road, where Acequia Madre merges into Canyon Road. The north front elevation, let me go back to that photograph, features its original T-shaped door and window configuration, where the door is flanked by two connected windows, each of which are 6 light wood casements. This simple configuration that combines one door and 2 windows in one opening, versus 3, It's commonly found in vernacular buildings in the downtown and the East Side Historic District. It's relatively low height. Another of its distinctive vernacular features is 10 feet at its north elevation facing Canyon Road, the fact that it's there, and the height decreases to 7 feet 6 inches at the back of the house. Its east elevation has a small wooden porch with a sloped overhang roof on its south end, and it's a below-grade entrance. What appears in the 2003 historic survey to be a multi-light steel casement window has been replaced by vinyl divided light windows, likely in the 90s. Previous alterations are not evident by city records, although it underwent the window replacements. It is not on the National or State Register. However, the city's historic building status map indicates it is contributing. The 2003 historic survey indicates that it is contributing to the downtown and east side historic district. This is the rear. And some more photographs of the house. This is the porch at subgrade, as well as the west elevation abutting the neighbor's yard. And the applicant provided elevations and a site plan. And this is the site plan, floor plan, with the two recommended primary facades. And I'll finish this report detailing that. And I think that's the last of the photos. I found that the building retains its historic character and integrity as it's expressed through its simple rectangular building envelope, its low height, flat roof, and siding where Acequia Madre merges with Canyon Road. The house's scale and original low adobe yard wall with stone base that lines the acequia are characteristic of historic Canyon Road. In particular, the north elevation's front entry's T-shaped door and window configuration continues to convey its original historic presence. The applicant has requested designation of primary facades as applicable. Staff recommends the historic status of the contributing structures be maintained as contributing for 14-5.2C, designation of significant and contributing structures, and that the original, the north front adobe yard wall, be included in the contributing designation. Staff also recommends that the north elevations of both structures, the house and the garage, located at the south of the main structure, be designated primary facades. And since I didn't bring up or cover the rear building, outbuilding, that was part of the house. It is over 50 years old and retains its historic character, and staff recommends that that north elevation, which was the previous garage door that now has a pedestrian door infilled, that facade be designated primary minus that infilled door. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Angela? Yes.
A couple questions. Angela, there isn't a photo of that north elevation of the garage or the former
Garage.
Yeah.
I don't have a photo of that. I didn't have time, but wanted to pull one off Google before the meeting, and I can look for that.
And currently, both buildings are contributing, right? So we do have to designate a primary facade for that outbuilding.
That is correct. And we have a photo of that outbuilding that we can project here, hopefully quickly.
Thank you. And I guess last question would be, if so much has changed on that structure, if the garage door has been filled in, why would we designate the north facade as opposed to, let's say, the east facade that faces the street?
Thank you for the question. We're going to see the photograph right here, right now, to help answer that.
Good. Thank you.
So I will respond to your question now that we have the visual in front of us. The garage still projects the garage aspect of it because the inset is still there of the garage door, the original garage door and the lintel. So that was a garage, and although it's been altered, still reads as a garage to the structure in front of it. Carly can add to that.
Thank you. Chair, members of the board. So another thing that's not quite noticeable from this photograph, so there's bullnosing that goes in towards that garage door, so it's still apparent. The other aspects are that roof line is quite undulating. It does have nicely battered adobe walls to it. So other than the addition, like the infill that could be taken away, and the addition of a door, what's the likely addition of a door on that other side there? I believe that's the east side, yes. It really retains its character. It might be a very simple form, but it is that nicely weird sloping parapet line and handcrafted look that also you see in the house. And I'm just going to make one more clarification. So the steel, and I think it just wasn't very clear in the staff report, the vinyl windows are on those 2/2 very territorial style looking vinyl windows. The steel casement window, that is still steel casement window, original window.
Thank you for clarifying.
Do you have anything else, Anthony?
No, I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Member Bienvenu.
Thank you, Chair Katz. Do we know, Angela, when the garage was filled in?
We do not have records on that.
Did it be historic?
I'm going to jump in here and say yes. Due to the fact that it follows a building pattern that is likely between the 1930s and the 1950s based on the garage width, it appears to be small, for a small car. It's not built to the standard of garages as they got bigger into the 50s and 60s. And it might have been infilled at that time and changed uses because it was too small. But it does follow that building footprint, that building pattern that where you have the garage in the back separated from the house that really emerged around the time of the late 30s, 40s. That it's adobe. You can see the way it's not very standardized. It points to that time period. I wouldn't go any farther than 1960 on that. Based on...
We're talking about the infill of the garage.
Oh, the infill.
Yeah, that's my question.
Not like...
I mean, I appreciate the other part. That's very helpful. But I was just curious about the infill as well, just because it's not the kind of infill you see in later years.
Excuse me, Chair and Board. I misread that question. No, likely not. Yeah. I'll let you have it.
It was helpful and germane, and
It was, yeah.
thank you. Your question is,
We
we don't know when the garage door was infilled, but likely historically, we don't know for sure.
And my other question, Angela, is on the east elevation of the main house that
Yes.
fronts the driveway.
Try to get back to that.
I certainly understand why you focused on the elevation that faces Canyon Road and its distinctive features, but the eastern elevation facing the driveway is it's extraordinarily characteristic of that style of house in that area at that time period. It looks like it's had very little change over the years. So just curious what your thoughts were in not proposing that as primary.
Yeah, thanks for the question. While that facade does typify long rectangular adobe structures along those lanes, I believe that the addition of the vinyl windows really detracts from the overall facade, and that the difference between those as well and with the steel casement, I think has changed the character of at least the north side, north end of that building, so that it doesn't warrant a primary facade designation by my reading.
Because of the alterations.
Because of the alterations. Did you want to add anything to that, Carly?
Sure. Chair, members of the board, I did want to add something there.
Excuse me for interrupting. Could we put a picture of that up?
My team may be able to help us if we can go back to the computer view, please. Not the overhead. Thank you. Okay.
Come back.
So I was about to add before switching that over. So that, if you look closely at that wall, while those windows have been changed, the two more territorial style windows and components around the window, like the window details, there are some machine cut territorial windows. There are also a saw cut piece in there, so it appears that some of that is still, those openings are historic. Windows may not be, minus the, or are rather, they are not, minus the steel casement window. The door is also a replacement door. That said, the wall is the wall's nicely vetted wall. It's very long, and for these very narrow streets, it's indicative of that kind of land planning, or rather lack thereof, in building on what you have. It has those deep canales. So there are aspects of this building that are they're still there and nicely historic features, and oftentimes we don't look closely enough, I think, at the walls. So it's something the board should consider on whether or not to designate this side. That said, if we looked at every building in the downtown east side that we've replaced the windows on and name them non-contributing based on the windows alone, that would be a big problem for our historic district.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Angela? Okay, I think we are moving to the public comment portion of the hearing. Does anyone have a public comment?
Mr. Chair, the applicant hasn't spoken yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh dear, I got ahead of myself, didn't I? Okay, the applicant, please come forward. Sorry.
I do swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Thomas Ortiz, 52 Condesa Road, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
What can you tell us?
Hello, board. Angela, thank you for the presentation. This is a beautiful, this is an interesting little casita, in the historic area that I think has undergone an extreme amount of renovations, probably through ownership doing just sort of, as they can and as they could afford at the time. This house originally started off as a two-room house, and then there's evidence that the back portion of the house was then added onto later because there's a solid adobe wall in the center of the building. What we're calling the garage at the back of the space is actually what would be called a cuartito, which wasn't really a garage, it was a workroom. Probably had two wooden doors because it's actually cinder block construction, and there's a wall with a door in between. So it's not one large space. It was always intended as, there was probably root storage maybe at one point, and then maybe a place where someone did some sort of, work in that space. So in terms of it being I agree that there's probably some designation on another elevation of this building that I think probably, I think, works better to that, unless there was some sort of, if the client wanted to come in later and open up that larger opening again, we just want to make sure that there isn't sort of a problem if they wanted to create two large wooden doors and bring it back to what it originally has, because what it currently has is a metal door that was put in probably in the 90s. The latest addition to this house was in the 90s, where they actually added, they changed the roof structure. They put in new vigas. They're much larger vigas, not typical of a house that size of that time period. And you can see that in the parapet. If you look at the photographs of some of the parapets, especially on that west wall, you'll notice that there's a bulge at the So if you'll see the sort of the shadow line there, that's all of that parapet was new and it was replaced. It's not adobe. It's actually a wood frame structure when they put the new roof on. They probably also raised the ceiling at that point. All of the windowsills in the space, and I have some photos if you'd like to see, showed evidence that all of these windows at one point were all wood double hung windows, and that even the steel casement window, which is in disrepair right now, was also a replacement for what was an original wood window, which eventually our intention is to take this building back to that era, or that genre of wood windows, true divided lights, things like that. We do respect the north facade facing the park with the really interesting T-shaped opening, and we'd like to retain that. What I'd like to request, though, is that the existing door and windows that are there are in such disrepair, as well as the door jambs and the frames have all been rotted out. There's been a doggy door that's been added to the bottom of this French door. They put a piece of plywood. So it's just gone through a lot of different sort of levels of people changing the house in little ways, and it's sort of become this sort of mishmash. So our intention, the client's intention, is to really take it back to something that is really sort of, northern New Mexico, sort of shotgun building with consistent windows and all handmade doors locally to this building.
I have a question about this east facade. That when was that roof raised in the parapet?
From what I can tell, it was 1990s, and there's no evidence of building permits. But from what I understand from the next door neighbor and they've lived there for some time, was that's when the work had been done.
Thank you. That helps. Questions for the applicant? Okay. Now we'll ask whether there's anyone from the public that wishes to comment. Anyone online? Okay, so bringing back to the board, what's your pleasure, board? Jennifer looks like she's ready to move.
I'll do that, thank you. In case number 2022-005596, HDRB at 1000 Canyon Road, I move to adopt staff's recommendation and designate the north facade of the house as primary and the north facade of the garage as primary.
With the exception of the infill?
Yeah, with the exception of the infill or other non-historic materials.
How about the wall in front? The yard wall?
Did staff make a recommendation on the yard wall? I'm sorry. Yes, the yard wall is included. Thank you.
Guido will second.
Okay, may we have a roll call? Melissa?
Member Beechey?
Yes.
Member Bienvenue?
Yes.
Member Guida?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, next case is case number 2022-005465, HDRB at 323 West Manhattan. Carly, you're going to present that one.
Thank you, Chair. Switch
switch on over. We will be looking at case, as you said, case 2022's 005465 HDRB, and that is located, all right, at 333 West Manhattan Street. It is in the Historic Transition District, and I may have misread that. I may have misspoke and called it a different district today at the field trip. So, just to make sure we're all clear. So we are looking at a house and a little structure in front. I'm not going to call it a garage because it is not and hasn't been. So this is the south. This is the south elevation that fronts the street. You can see that nice historic window on the right side there, and then we've got an aluminum slider and a door there on the left. So this is a New Mexico, it's a northern New Mexico style. In our HCPI, we call it a vernacular style, but we consider this really that house style. So based on our Sanborn maps and newspaper archives, we can date it to just about 1920, but definitely not 1921, when there were advertisements for the guest house in the front. And it was owned by a woman who seems to be from Taos, New Mexico. So this is the west facade of the main house. And you can see another historic window, and it's kind of a bit of a repeat of the facade. And then there's this porch addition on the back. I'm just going to make note of that north facade here. And this, we'll discuss that in just a moment. The east facade has many historic windows on it, and it is right there, close to the property line. And here's the guest house. This is the facade that we are, staff is recommending as primary. And as I stated, the guest house in newspaper articles was advertised in 1921. But you can see there's historic windows here, but not. The door is a replacement door on the front there. Okay, and it was a simple building with a shed roof, and it was built at the same time as the house. Okay, in older photos you can see the texturing of the adobe there. In your packet it's probably more visible. But the house really started as an L shape with a little infill of a portal right about here, and then grew in the right around the late 60s. I know I wouldn't go to 1970 to infill and add on more of a porch. That screened-in porch is right here. So that's the change of the footprint. And then staff is really recommending the south facade as the primary facade. Now there is that west facade that if the board, the staff felt it was really a repeat, and the addition to a 10-foot, within 10 feet of the primary facade, rather, that rule also protects this gable. And that's the idea that we always protect when we have a gable roof like this, that we protect that profile line, if that makes sense. So what we're looking at is when we look at the front of the house on the south, that we capture both gables. Here are the elevations of the guest house. So staff's recommendation is to go for the south of both facades. Or sorry, but it's the south elevations of both structures. That concludes my presentation, and I'll stand for questions, or we can turn it over to the applicant.
Does anyone have a question for Carly on this? Okay. Christopher?
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Christopher Purvis, 518 Old Santa Fe Trail. Vice Chair Katz,
So,
nice to see you all again.
what can you add?
Can't add a lot. I mean, it's kind of a cool little old house. And I agree with staff that the street-facing facade should be primary.
Straightforward. Questions? Anyone from the public wish to comment on this case? No one online? Okay, come back to the board, and Member Bienvenu is going to make a motion.
Thank you, Chair Katz. Case number 2022-005-465, HDRB, 333 West Manhattan Avenue. I move that the board adopt the recommendations of staff and the reasoning of staff as set forth in the recommendation, that the structures be maintained as contributing, as the south facades of both structures be designated as primary.
I will second.
May we have a roll call vote, please?
Member Beachay?
Yes.
Member Bienvenu?
Yes.
Member Guida?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
You know, if you all agree, I don't get to vote. So, thank you all. Okay, moving on to the next case, case number 2022-005448, HDRB at 532 Don Gaspar Avenue. Carly?
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. All right, so we've seen this one recently. This is 532 Don Gaspar Avenue, one of the lovely twins. We saw it for a status review in the last couple of months. It was, while it is a single family, the building type is a single family house, it's always been used as a business. So I just want to bring us back to that context, and that it is in the Don Gaspar Area Historic District, Craftsman Bungalow. And then it faces the Don Gaspar Avenue and West San Francisco Avenue. Okay. Here are some of our photographs. Again, I'm just going to point out the roof. That's one of the primary changes that we're looking at tonight, is to replace that roof. I will note that the sister of this house, the other twin, it did have a roof replacement, and that is what the one of the components of the application are. That does not, while there are requests for exceptions given by the applicant, those came in at the same time or just about the same time as the roof assessment. And after looking at the roof assessment, our exception was then peeled back and not required by staff due to the fact that they offered the proof of the rotted roof decking and that material. So the way that code reads is also with the windows. If all windows are shown to be beyond repair, we don't have to request an exception. Does need to go to the board. It is replacement of historic material. Okay. Oh, and or if it is not being replaced in kind. So the next part of this request is to replace all the non-historic windows with wood casement windows and in kind. So there are window specs and brochures in the packet. There's also a window assessment, and so the next portion of this is to replace all historic windows that are rated unsatisfactory by the window assessment. And they're to be replaced with mostly with the double-hung wood casement windows, but there are some that are also to be replaced in kind, but they're a slightly different shape. So that amounts to 7 of the 23 windows. And then, let's see, I just want to point to the Windows Assessor defines unsatisfactory as having all sashes, frames, casings, and casing members to be more than 30 to 40% deterioration. That aligns with our code. That also aligns internally with how staff has interpreted cannot be repaired, because typically we see as every piece has to be degraded up to the level of 30% or more. Okay, the next piece is to remove the west and back porch. The request was made from staff to have a historian analyze the porch in the back. Now, the language that was used by the historian was it may be, well, it may be, it was non-harmonious. So it may be historic, but it was seen as non-harmonious. And that is, so we know it's not historic. Here's the Sanborn maps that show some different, a much smaller shape. But it appears it could be historic. So it's kind of on that line. It was a later addition. And you can see pictures of it here. So, okay, and so that replacement that is being proposed is to have some similar wood posts, but to be in keeping with the rest of the building, and to have a shed roof, to be a larger, it is to extend all the way to this portion of the house. And we'll go to the drawings here. And while I'm on this photograph, this handicap ramp is to be removed as well. And part of this porch addition that expands to the length, this entire length of the porch here on that back side, is to add a handicap lift on that back end there. And that expands the porch area to allow more room, and removing these stairs to allow that access to come around. Okay. So for this, there is an exception request, and that is, okay, that's our windows. Let me go to the other one. Actually, okay, so the exception request still stays in place despite the historian's letter because we are replacing this material. The fact that a historian says it's not harmonious is not quite enough to to bypass that code, but it is enough to bring forward to the board more information to really make a grounded decision. So, with that said, staff finds that all exception criteria have been met on this proposal, and then we approve the application. Or recommend the application, but with a condition that the wrought iron gate be black wrought iron and not painted to match the stucco. This is just an item of wrought iron gates typically aren't painted, at least not in that time period. So that was one item that staff felt that it was important to recommend a condition for. Otherwise, we recommend approval. And that concludes the presentation.
The packet mentioned something about the posts on the back porch. Is that still something that you want to raise?
Oh, yes. Let me go back to that. Thank you, Chair. Okay. So the issue here is just that that's a bit of more of a modern detail. That's something the board might consider, the porch post going all the way to that edge. That inset is a little bit more common. The house itself has an inset for all of the roof details come over over the walls, and would have for the porch as well. So that's just one area to note that also might be considered. So,
Thank you. Anyone has a question?
I do.
Yes,
Carly, I'm not seeing in the packet an indication of where the yard wall is proposed. Did you receive a?
It is on the. It should be on the site plan itself, and then there's a detail for there's a oh, I didn't put the detail in. I can pull up the packet, but there's a detail for the yard wall, and then the location of the yard wall. Most of that is in the notes.
Okay.
This application did get updated a few times as we work to bring it closer into compliance. So, but I think because we're also looking at a very small drawing on my screen, it might be very helpful to have the applicant clarify exactly the beginning and end of that wall, number 3. Okay, so yes, item number 3. I knew it was by the items in the call-outs. So you can see a very tiny item number 3. So we have it all along this side, and we're looking at all along the side, but the stopping point. Can you come up and point us exactly where we're stopping it? Because I know we're stopping it right around yes, right where those parking spaces end, where my cursor is going up and down. So it aligns with that. That was my understanding as well. Good. So that's where the gate is.
Okay.
Where the sidewalk ends, straight out of that front porch.
And 2 other questions. Is there any work being proposed to the studio building?
No, not this time.
Okay. And am I correct in observing that the guardrail for the proposed porch is not shown in the packet?
That is correct. There is a call out that there will be a guardrail, but it is not shown. And that's a detail that we would need submitted prior to approval for the final permit.
Thank you.
Yes, Member Bienvenu.
Thank you, Chair Cass. Just following up on the wall issue, what's before us exactly on that? It fits within the height restriction,
It's a
correct?
4-foot wall, so it could be approved administratively, but this is also a significant property. So that's something that, based on the streetscape, we found, I think it's something that would need to be, it should really go to the board as part of the package.
Okay.
And I think there were, you have in your packet photographs of the streetscape. There were likely picket fences and other walls like that, but not necessarily a stucco wall on this property.
Right.
So, and I think that was also outlined in the letter by the historian at the request of staff.
Yeah, I thought that jumped out at me too. That was very delicately phrased in the historian's letter. That they're not common, but there's precedent for them. But that still begs the question to me what we do with that information, because it's allowed, right? How could that not be allowed? Would there be a provision in the code? Not that that's my goal here. I'm just curious what we're deciding.
There's not a provision in the code unless we're looking at this the space that embodies, which is really a different kind of a loose translation. But that also, you can, I mean, the one way we're really reading it as staff is we're looking at the streetscape here. So this was a cluster of buildings that was built by an Italian-American widow, and this was always meant to be a business. And it is surrounded by businesses. Some that do, there are, one side of the street has several walls, or one end of the street, rather, and then the other doesn't. So this is something to consider as the board, as part of this overall package.
Okay, good. Well, thank you.
Member Beach.
Just to follow up on that, a lot was made of the twin for this house when we designated it as significant. Does that house have a wall?
It has no wall.
Thank you.
I have a question about the sister also. Is the roof quite shiny?
It is fairly shiny. It hasn't aged at all. It is, it's the same, what's on that is the proposal in front of you tonight is the same material that is on that roof. Now, it was replaced just later than 2010. So, so it's fairly recent.
I have noticed a very, very shiny roof driving east on Paseo, and I think that's the roof that I'm looking at, and I was wondering, is there any way of making it not quite so shiny? I don't know.
That's based on the product and the specification, I don't know that for sure, but that it's a good question if it can be a brushed finish or a further something that's not gown about. So.
Thank you. Okay, would the applicant come forward, get sworn in, and present?
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, I'm Kevin Georges, 214 Truman Street Northeast, Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm the architect for the project.
Thank you.
First, again, I'd like to thank Carly for being so patient with us. This is our first time doing this, and you guys have a really tough job, and I really appreciate what you're doing. We agree with the staff's recommendations. The historian, I think, did an outstanding job. We found some things out about the project that we didn't know, so we really appreciated that recommendation that you made to hire a historian to help us with the wall and the porch. So we agree with what you had to say in the recommendation. Is there any questions? I will look and see if there's a dull finish on that roof tile. Most of them are tin and they're shiny finish.
The placement of the posts on the back porch and the railing on the back porch, what is the story?
Well, the existing that's on that little bit of a porch out the back door is wood. We're open to either wood or wrought iron. The one that's up front, if you look at the pictures of the front of the building, it's metal. We wouldn't be opposed to metal either, really whatever staff would like us to do.
And are you willing to have the posts set back from the edge,
Yes.
the 6 inches that Carly had suggested? That's good. Okay.
We agree with their recommendation.
Okay. Anyone else have questions for the applicant?
Thank you very
Any
much.
questions from the audience? Any questions from the listening audience? Okay, back to the board. Member Guida.
Thank you, Chair Katz. So I guess for the benefit of discussion, I have a few issues with the project as proposed. I mean, I think the issue of completeness of the drawings for the rear porch needs to be addressed. Because what I'm seeing now does not constitute a full design for the purposes of this board. I have no problem with removing the existing porch. I feel like it is unsympathetic to the existing house. The one that is proposed overall in its kind of form and its mass, I think better suits the house. But I think for this board to approve it, given its public visibility, and given the status of this house, we would need to see a fuller presentation of what is intended. I think right now there's just not enough detail either in the placement of those columns relative to the perimeter of the porch roof structure, the spacing of those columns, which seems overly tight, and the expression of the guardrail and the skirting and the base under there. It just needs more drawings for us to consider. I think wood would be an appropriate choice. Again, this porch will it'll be very obvious that it's of this time, and not, we're not trying to trick anybody that it was built with the house, but it does need to be in keeping and sensitive to the house. And there are some clues, both in terms of porch columns and in terms of other wood handrails that I think you could draw from on the existing house. So for me, that's the porch. The concern I have about the wall is just, if a CMU and stucco wall is being proposed, per the detail, at least on the drawing around the gate and stuff, this is simple. It's got a rounded top. It's not a brick coping or anything like that. I'm not seeing how this is an appropriate wall material for the style of this particular house. So it seemed to me that, that would be more appropriate for a Spanish Pueblo Revival house or that we see elsewhere on the street. And I think a lot of the examples show that. There are some photos of other yard walls that have more brick detailing, both the coping and just more brick expression with stucco, which, is the Santa Fe default. But, just the kind of alignment of stucco and this brick house seems to be a bit curious to me. There's a photo of a small section of wood picket fencing. I would think that would be a more appropriate wall material for this property. And lastly is the roof material, which I know has been a point of discussion with this board before. Both of these houses, having had, and many houses on this block, having had metal roofs, it's a curiosity. It's not super common in terms of the craftsman style throughout the country and stuff like that. It's known that metal roofing material was of this era and of the era immediately preceding it. I don't see what's being proposed as replacement in kind. The Victorian style metal shingle does not agree with the style of the house. I agree the one next door is too shiny, and that we would endeavor to not have as light and as shiny a roof. But I'm taking more issue with the profile of the shingle. If this house is to have a metal roof, which I think is a kind of fine replacement, and especially if we're intending to replace in kind, I think there are other styles of widely available metal roofing shingles that have different profiles other than this kind of Victorian scalloped pattern that's shown in the material section. There's everything under the sun. There's metal that looks like shakes. There's metal that kind of is a kind of flat version of a Spanish tile. I think all of those two things would be better than what's currently proposed. So I'd like to see a different proposal for the roof material, especially since it's such a big part of the architecture of the house and that it's also on the dormers' facades as well. And that's all I have to say.
To what extent what does the current roof look like? I don't know we have a good picture of the current roof to see what its pattern is.
Is it assumed to be the original?
Yes, that's correct. This is not the greatest detail, so I'm going to pull up the packet I have on the desktop here. Can you choose that one?
I mean,
That one? Okay.
Is there a page?
There we go. Here we go. Got it. All right.
65 in the packet shows some close-ups of the shingles.
All right, so packet page number 49, and then there's another one that's a little bit further backed out. Yeah.
Carly, in the packet, there's a kind of elevational view of the gable ends of the house that shows the shingle a little bit more clearly.
Okay. That was not as strong. You know what page you've got up?
65 in the packet.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah. And you know, maybe maybe not agreeing with my former point, you know, if we look closely at these shingles, they do have a similar scallop to what's being proposed. You know, I'm just struggling a bit with that aspect of both, I guess, both the original architecture and what's being proposed.
What we heard last time when you designated all the elevations was that you were making so many comments about the sister building that we were trying to match it, and that's what we were trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Member Beechan.
Just wondering, are the shingles the same on the roof as they are on the dormers? It's hard to tell from the photos if they actually match. Are they the same shingles on top of the roof as on the
sister building?
faces?
No.
On the faces of the dormers.
Oh, no, they match the sister building.
So just to restate the question, so we're looking at the shingles on the dormers.
Right.
Is that the same as what's on the roof?
Yes.
Is the question.
Yes.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah. The sister building has this kind of more pronounced, you know, Victorian edge to it. It just doesn't seem right, but it's a bit of a conundrum.
so I thought you made a lot of good comments, Anthony, but that and particularly on the drawings in the back of the porch and the issue of the shingles. So what do we want to do? Do we want to postpone and have them come back with drawings that really adequately show what they're planning in the back and perhaps some further thoughts on shingles? Are there other aspects? The wall you want designed?
Yeah. And
There's like
I
those-
think it'll be important just because we've gone around with this so many times with metal roofs in particular, that the board give the applicant some direction. And maybe, Carly, I'd love for you to weigh in on what you think is appropriate under the circumstances of the building status and what's occurred next door.
Thank you, Chair and Member Quita. It is a conundrum because to choose a different material than the building next door, it becomes less of a twin potentially. What's being proposed shows the like pronounced shingles, but they are panels. So and they don't necessarily appear as panels. So that's the difference. That's the big difference. So it's one that I find hard because it's to choose something different then becomes different than its sister. If it's different slightly, then will it get changed again in 50 years, or probably a little less because our materials aren't quite as good for this 24 gauge steel. Maybe. Maybe that next replacement for the sister will be better. So I think maybe that's the best logic to go with, is to go with the right choice, maybe not matching.
Are we obligated to replace in kind, given the status of the building?
We are obligated to replace in kind on a significant and a contributing. So if the board finds that this is not in kind, then that would be enough to say. And maybe 10 years, I think the other one was replaced somewhere around 8 to 10 years ago. And maybe the options were a little less then. That could have been the case. But I know it was done via an administrative approval, which is not, I think that was something that should have gone to the board, being significant, because the other one at the time was significant. The thoughts on redesign for the wall, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially the lighter weight picket fence or something with a brick detail. But now that could be approved by staff procedurally. Those are the thoughts there. But details on the porch, that might be something that the board wants to see, given the status of the building. The other things might be things that you could see as a duller finish and a more exact match to the roofing material could be administrative approval. But given if the board wants to see the porch come back, then you would want to see the whole package come back. Procedurally, we do not like to split these things up because it makes the permitting much harder for the applicant.
If I could, I'd like you guys to pick out the shingle that we use. This owner really doesn't care. He just needs to get started. We've been ready since the beginning of the year.
So do you want to make a motion to postpone with those specifics in mind?
Do we think we could have an updated proposal with just those items and the porch detailing ready for a date certain, which would be 2 weeks from now at the next hearing? We'll offer that.
You can tell us what shingle to use.
That we can help with, but I don't know that we can come to do that kind of research. We may.
I just don't want to be back here in 2 weeks and then you guys say you don't like that one.
I think staff can say that the board is directing towards not panelized and independent shingles and a duller finish. Does that sound okay, I think what we're hearing.
There doesn't seem to be a lot of pattern in that. I mean, it's like a pretty flat metal shingle without, one of these fancy designs that are shown.
Yeah, we just showed the design. You guys said you want us to match the building to the north.
Yeah, no, that's totally reasonable. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, a flat panel would be cheaper than a pattern one.
Member Benjamin.
Thank you, Chair Cass. So, yeah, just to add to that thought, I mean, I think that the direction is, you made a very logical assumption to go with the matching, but for the reasons that Carly just articulated earlier, I also don't think it's a good idea, actually, as much as you took that from our last discussion to match the roof itself to the one next door, because that was probably not the best option at the time. So we don't want to repeat the mistakes. So what we'd be looking for would be the closest in-kind match that can be found, which is consistent with the ordinance.
So in case 2022-00544 HDRB 532 Don Gaspar Avenue, I move that the applicant be directed to return to the board with the following design improvements. These include all elevations of the proposed porch to the rear of the building. In terms of the style of this porch, it should be wood columns inset from the edge of the roof, spaced further apart, and that the drawings include the design intent for the guardrail and the skirting around the proposed porch. That the applicant return with a proposal for the metal roof shingle replacement that has more of a pronounced shingle effect that's similar, that's closer to what exists on the building right now, as opposed to a panelized effect, and that the finish be duller than what is currently on the house next door. Ideally, applicant would bring a sample of said roofing to the hearing. And then also that should be updated is the proposal for the yard wall. The board has articulated that a picket fence and gate would be more appropriate for the house. Do we have to say a date certain? Do we know what that is?
Oh, I believe you can just say a date.
Date certain. Okay. I'm done.
I would second the motion, but just a clarification, are you limiting the options on the wall to nothing but a picket fence? Or are you willing to look at other options if they present it to the board?
Other options could be entertained.
Our owner was liking the brick detail across the street.
Right.
When we drew the detail, he was out of the country, so we didn't have a chance to talk to him about it.
Okay, so you have the ability to present options other than the picket fence, although that would be a good option. But we're not restricting you to that, but it would be very nice to see elevation drawings of the actual fence so that we can, and with the house included, so we can see what the final effect would be.
And of course, option for no wall at all, it remains.
Yes, we're not requiring a wall.
Okay, are we all clear on that?
Sure. Do we have a second?
Yes. Can we have a roll call vote, Melissa?
Member Beachside?
Yes.
Member Bienvenue?
Yes.
Member Guida?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Some of us will see you. Okay, moving to our last
Excuse me,
case.
Chair.
Yes.
Vice Chair Cantz, I think we should set a specific date.
Tell us.
August 23rd.
August 21st.
23rd.
23rd. Okay. Okay, our last case is case number
Do you want to?
2022-005634 HDRB at 212 Gonzales Road, 212A Gonzales Road.
Thank you. Greetings. Again, this is our last case, 212 Gonzales Road, Unit A, case number 2022-005634. You are familiar with this property. The applicant was before you a couple meetings ago for a status evaluation, primary facade designation. I'm not going to read the description of the property, just to highlight or recap that this property is located off of Gonzales Road, and this is Lorenzo Lane, and it's back here where the red circle is. That's the perspective of it from the Lorenzo Lane portion by the south view. Let's see. This is part of the south elevation. This is the east elevation. And at the board meeting, the board designated numbers, basically number 2 and number 3 facades, which is not this one. It is the inset porch that's between the trees there. Those were the designated primary facades. The applicant proposes the following exterior alterations, and that is to add on to the southwest corner, a 250 square foot room. It'll have a flat roof, parapets matching the existing house in height, and to add on to the north end, the northwest corner, this yellowed area, which will also match the house's flat roof, height, parapets, and it's 120 square feet addition. This is the proposed floor plan. These are your two, these were designated primary facades at the last meeting. Primary facades 2 and 3. The applicant proposes on the south elevation originally proposed to replace the steel casement window, which is on this corner here. I'm sorry, this has gotten confusing. It's a little late, and I know the applicant has some changes to this that we're going to get to. I'll just try to set this up so that we can get through this fast. I reviewed this case as if the south elevation was designated primary at the last meeting, and according to the minutes and the findings, et cetera, it was only facades 2 and 3. Because the applicant had proposed to remove that corner window, and I said it was primary and required an exception. That exception is no longer required. The exception that is required is for removing the window on on facade number 3, an original window, and replacing that window. Other parts of the project include changing out the sliding glass door on the north elevation. It's non-historic. And here's the existing elevations and the proposed elevations. This is that corner window, non-primary facade, proposing this change from the aluminum glass slider to a divided light, and then wants to replace this 3/3 casement with another window. On the east elevation, none of which are considered primary except for that inset in the portal, under the portal. The existing, changes are replacing windows. And on the north elevation, this is the existing, go back. This is the existing condition in the photo above. It has, the addition is going in back here. And this window and this window are being replaced, this by a door, and these are being added. Let's see. New door will be metal clad wood frame, which will be matte dark bronze, which is the scheme of the replacement windows. On the west elevation, this is the proposed addition. Here, this window will change to this. This will either change to this or that's part of the addition. I'll let the applicant explain that. And the applicant proposes this color stucco elastomeric. And that's it. I'll let the applicant answer more questions about the design, and I'm here to answer any other questions you have right now. I recommended that, saw that the applicant hadn't met all the exceptions, but that left it to the board to decide. As I've verbally amended into the record, the applicant is not requesting an exception to replacing the corner window or adding on to the structure less than 10 feet from a primary facade, because number one is not a primary facade. So, clear? Okay. Thank you.
I guess I'm confused, Angela, about the record, because I see in the packet, maybe this is what you're verbally amending, that you have a document that you signed saying that facades 1, 2, and 3 were designated primary, excluding the sliding glass door, right?
Clarification is that was what I took away from the meeting, and I, according to the record, was in error that it was only facades 2 and 3 that were designated primary.
It isn't the sliding glass door on 1?
It is on 1.
How could we have excluded that?
Oh, so in my understanding of how it went down the first time was that facade with the sliding glass door was number 1, and I considered primary excluding that glass door.
Right.
So now that's not, it's just a description of replacing the sliding glass door, but there's no code issues with that.
Okay.
So I recall this case pretty clearly. Like, we were asked to designate primary facades on a building that was already designated contributing. And I think at the hearing, we all sort of agreed that this probably did not deserve the contributing status that it currently has. Rather than postpone it for a downgrade, I think we agreed to designate minimal facades as primary in order to proceed. I don't think that, I definitely remember it was just 2 and 3, not 1. But that was sort of the logic at the time, and I hope that it doesn't sort of bog down the project, because we were trying to facilitate, getting to this point where they could propose the renovations.
Thank you, Chair, and members of the board. So just to clarify too, that's number 2 and 3 were, that was the motion, that was included in the facts, findings, and conclusions of law, and that was what was voted on. So those facades 2 and 3 were only what's there, what was established as primary facades. And then the recommendation that the board, or the notes that the board gave to potentially come back as a downgrade, that was also discussed with the applicant. The applicant, based on knowing that they'd have to go through another hearing, chose to go ahead and move forward with this application. So.
Okay. The applicant, come forward, please. Get sworn in. Tell us what your plan is.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Raja Bose at 3480 Todo Santos Street, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87507. So, happy to be back here. We've been long waiting the chance to actually propose a design itself, so thanks for looking at this with us today. So my understanding is, after the clarification of the primary facade issue, the real only kind of actual exception we're here to discuss is just that one single window here that's the south kitchen window, I'll refer to it as. In general, our approach for this house has been to kind of maintain its proportions and its look and feel, while improving every system possible. So all the way from the roof insulation, the wall insulation, the HVAC systems, blah, blah, blah. I don't have to bore you with that, but you know that the windows are a huge part of the energy performance and the look, right? So our goal is just to address both of those things with this metal-clad wood window that was mentioned. I guess I'm stating something globally about the whole project, but also with reference to the south kitchen window that we're able to reproduce the Muntin pattern. We're able to fit the aperture as well. The divided light, the new divided light Muntins are only 7/8 of an inch, so it's pretty narrow. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like it's a pretty reasonable exception in terms of what's happening there as the physical replacement. And then another part of that is that we wanted to add some operability into the window just from a cross ventilation point of view. We're trying to make sure that basically every single room in this house has at least 2 opposite walled casement openings. So when you look at the overall design approach too, keep in mind that's how we've chosen to open stuff up. It's not just kind of random. And that goes for the corner window as well. But anyway, so I'll stop. That's the specific justification for that window replacement. We've understood, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we're allowed to replace basically all the other windows we've proposed, given that they're not on primary facades. So one thing I've come to understand as well, and now I'm kind of changing to another topic here, but just in one breath, the corner window is clearly kind of the most characteristic thing on this house. And so I guess we're kind of asking the impossible, but I just wanted to test the water for you guys from your point of view as your rules, because on one hand, we'd like to propose to change out this glass or this window system for a newer thermally broken one. Carly has brought to my attention that if we were to replace that material, that would trigger an ordinance that requires the 3-foot separation from the corner post. And I understand that we don't have an official exception for that right now, so I'm asking you in candid more than anything. But would you be potentially amenable to us respecting the steel kind of mid-mod look that this house clearly is a fusion of kind of Pueblo and mid-mod? There's no other way to say it. Would you go for us changing out those windows in their existing aperture, keeping that structural pole that you see, that post, with a new system? So in conclusion, our specific justification for the windows is that it's a full, it's a full system around the house. They'll be improving the thermal quality extremely, and we feel like we've respected not only the rules of the neighborhood, but also the proportions that are there in this house already. I'll leave it at that.
Carly, I have a question about the corner window. If the apertures are remaining the same and the only thing that's happening is the actual window itself, the frame and the glass are being replaced, would that necessarily trigger the 3-foot rule?
Thank you, Chair. So this is in the downtown east side. And it is a visible facade. And it's a non-conforming window. So the code rules are that when work is being done, that that replacement would have to come into conformance. That's the way the A6, 14-5.2 A6 reads, is that if you were, and this is the way the board has ruled in the past, and when we've applied the rule to an entire house, like, you're doing an addition and a couple changes, and we've seen publicly visible, non-historic windows with not divided light glass, and read the code in the way that, in a more strict way, that they should come into compliance. This board, within the last year, has said there's no work being done on that window. That is wasteful. Or no work being done on that side of the house. That's the way the board has interpreted that rule. That said, so if this window were to be restored rather than replaced, then, or just maintained, then it wouldn't necessarily come into that nonconformance. It wouldn't trigger that nonconformance portion of the code necessarily. If the other portion of that if the board decides to allow it to stand nonconforming because of its architectural interest, that is also allowable. But if it has to be suitable to the board's standards. So I will have to give you the exact language, but you can choose to leave it as non-conforming for its architectural interest. Very similar to the Camino Pequeño case that we're so familiar with now.
Does that require an exception?
No, that did not require an exception in the last, according to the way the board ruled on Camino Pequeño. We had a very long discussion about it with legal advisement too. So if the board deems it as non-conforming for architectural interest, then no, because the exceptions were not also required in that case.
Okay, that's helpful.
It would have to be stated that way in the motion, though.
Let me ask the applicant, can that window not be repaired, restored in some sense? We don't have to go through all those questionable.
I mean, there's my opinion, and then there's, a steel window manufacturer, restoration opinion, which I think diverge, honestly, in being rational in today's energy standards and assembly standards and stuff. Yes, it probably could be repaired, at least in situ. I don't know, removing it would probably, you have to break all the glass, scrape everything down, sandblast it, blah, blah, blah. One huge issue is that over the years, people have badly plastered up into the casement. So none of the windows except for maybe one in this entire house open because they've just sloppily added on, which is, from an architectural point of view, has ruined the window because in order to replace it, you have to cause damage to the envelope of the building, which is not usually the case if the window is installed correctly, So, yes, except we're very hesitant to, and we would much rather put a really nice looking new window that looks, and we'd be even willing to take it as far as imitate the Muntin pattern 1-to-1, which we're not actually showing here, but if you look, there's that larger light. So, that's totally within the realm of possibility for us as well, just to put that out there, but yes, it's technically repairable.
Member Guida.
Thank you. So this is a really cool house, and I really appreciate the design and the kind of overall approach to kind of keep the massing, enhance the best features of the house. This is something that we don't see every day. It's a kind of, I wasn't here for the status determination, but it's, if it's late 40s or late 50s, it's this kind of, it's really modern, it's modern or modernist, right, more than kind of what we typically see or associate with 1950s and 1960s architectures. It's, in my mind, it's really unique in Santa Fe, even if it wasn't done all at once. That corner window is super special. A lot of the magic happens not only because of the massing and the corner window, these non-conforming features, but also because of the contrast between the mass and the thinness of the window expression and the fenestration. your proposal is to replace all of the windows with a aluminum-clad wood window system, and the divisions between the lights could be as small as 7/8, and you could replicate the pattern. But given that it's insulated glass and they're casements, the sash around the casement is going to be much thicker than 7/8. And is there I'm concerned that you lose something. Look, everything's a compromise, but I'm concerned that you lose a lot, especially because these are very small windows in that scenario. And my question is, even within the discussion of energy performance and all of those other considerations, has there been any other discussion about metal windows or other that kind of meet current code?
Yeah, I think by and large, metal windows are extremely in fashion, maybe even more today than they were, originally. And this is the honest truth. I'm not even trying to push my cause, but to get nice thermally broken steel windows is a fortune. That would probably quadruple our window system budget, to be honest, because these are just Windsor, Pinnacle, they're good, but they're not So I would say yes, that product exists. It's being done. It looks awesome for sure. But I think within our standard residential range, I think this is getting close to as good as it can be. That being said, you can also reduce the amount of casement situations where it is a single frame. And actually, we've tried to do that. If you look at this back living room window, we're trying to keep it these little wings that open up a little bit, which is actually typical of the steel window too, because the idea is it would be a basic steel frame, but they would add hardware as needed, right? So the handle might have a rectangle and so forth. So to the effect that we're trying to minimize, I would say, I would respond yes, we're trying. Could we buy a way more expensive system? Yes, but we'd rather not.
And I know some of the, Fleetwood systems and Western windows will have a really thick casement sash if it's an all-metal unit. There are also Geldwin windows and basic commodity windows that are available in colors that could have smaller dimensions. Have you looked in that direction? I know you looked at the very expensive option, but are there other kind of cheap options that may actually give you a thinner profile?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is basically with Sierra Pacific or Jeld-Wen or Lowen or any of these recognized American brands, that the more expensive you go, the better, the more the simulated divided light looks real. Now they're even putting a little piece of foam in there, so there's no double glass shadow nonsense. And they're making it a better material so it doesn't bow away from the glass and break the illusion. But part of the other thing that you're paying for, to my understanding, is the narrowness of the assembly. So, I mean, when you see the modern, again, Windsor Pinnacle is our spec. When you see their installs, I mean, they do really modern stuff, but a lot of the time is kind of also oriented around this factory window, let's call it. I think it looks good. From my critical opinion of also not wanting this to look too thick, I think it looks good. But I think we're paying a lot for these windows to get this line. So I feel like we've tried.
Okay. Good.
We move to public comment. Doesn't seem to be anyone from the public here, and there's no one public online. So come back to us, and where are we? Pleasure.
Just to summarize, the only exception that's being requested is for the window that's in the replacement of the window in a primary facade. And the illustration pattern is being changed, or it's just the operation?
No, no, the fenestration's not being changed. Yes, some operation is being added.
Okay. And we're going from casement to what, slider, or?
No, it's going from fixed to casement. Okay. So it's going from nothing to one bay.
Okay.
Yeah. which actually, now that I'm looking at this, I think it may even already be a little operable in that corner. It didn't make it into the as-built. So I don't even know if we're changing the function. It's really just imitating it exactly.
It's a shame we can't see the windows that you're proposing. And
Do you mean like better photos?
yeah,
So I'm happy to show you that. Can I get this? Here, I can work with this, I think. Okay, so accept our error in our as-built drawing, but it actually is Eastman already. Or, I mean, it has some operability already. So you can see the overall condition. Granted, it has a fresh coat of blue paint like any person would do, so it doesn't look that bad. But
do you have just to get to the point, do you have the new windows, what you're proposing? Please give an image of that.
do I have the new?
Yeah, like a manufacturer's photo.
Yeah. This is actually a screenshot of our. Is there a, could I visit the website? Is there Wi-Fi I could get on, or is that? City Hall guest, is that easy to get on? But while that connects, the metal portion, I typed it. Like Member Guida pointed out, obviously the frame and sash is much thicker when it's casement, but also when it's not operable, it gets a lot thinner, so. This is the system. I mean, even just looking at that, it gives you a subsense of the divided light nature. That's a modern project, so it's not super. It's a little misleading because it's the interior. Anyway.
This is helpful.
Okay.
You know, it's clear that this manufacturer, the divided light muntins are super thin. And I think you're proposing also a dark bronze finish for the windows?
Yeah.
Which really reduces its visual mass from the outside of the building. I think that's a good compromise.
And so you know, it's not aluminum cladding, it's actually, it is aluminum, but it's not sheet rolled, it's extruded.
Okay.
So the cladding is extruded, meaning that it's not going to like buckle and what do you call it? Tin can or whatever.
Yeah.
Oil can.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, so that's one advantage over its competitor, Pella, who is actually more expensive also. So.
Good.
Yeah, and then just to drive this home, the quality of these windows is just, like I said, it's not just the windows, it's the building too. You know, this house was, how to put it politely, the maintenance was deferred for about half a century. So.
And one last question, is it your intent to leave the steel post exposed, or you'll cap it, or?
Yeah, so definitely leave it because it is acting structurally now, right now. But our intent was, if we could, to kind of cover it just a little bit with insulation and basically wrap like a column metal wrap around it that would match the cladding, as is like basically a standard corner detail today. It would be rectangular, but
inset from the stucco?
Yeah, it would be inset, and it would look like the quality of the architecture that's being proposed, you know what I mean? Like more than a circular post would, I think. But
okay.
I understand wanting to keep that too. It does make it more difficult to mount a new window to a circular thing, as you guys know.
Clearly, yeah. Okay, good. I'm done with my interrogation. Thank you for the response. It's good to see this so you don't have to come back. So.
No, I really appreciate it.
Now that you've finished your inquiry, are you ready to do your motion?
I am.
Okay, and you got the wording that Carly gave you?
I think so.
Excellent. Go.
So in case 2022-005-634 HDRB 212 Gonzales Road, I move that we approve the project as submitted with the following conditions approve the project as submitted, finding that the exception criteria for the change-out of a window in a primary facade have been met, and with the following conditions, that the applicant update the drawings for staff to reflect the proposed fenestration patterns that were discussed this evening, ones that are more closely aligned with the existing window divided light patterns, and that the applicant also submit, if he hasn't done already, the material cut sheet for these windows. And lastly, the reason why the corner window can be replaced. The board recognizes that this is a non-conforming condition in a building that has architectural merit, and so we are approving it on those grounds.
Have a second?
Okay. May we?
Can you please turn on your microphone?
It's still on. I just wonder if we could tweak that language slightly, that it has architectural and historic interest with respect to this specific property. And the reason I'm asking for that addition is because otherwise we might be saying that every corner window in town automatically has historic interest or architectural interest, Would that be acceptable?
That's an excellent clarification.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we have a roll call vote on that.
Sorry, I renew my second.
Member Beechey?
Yes.
Member Bienvenu?
Yes.
Member Guida?
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that from all of you. I realized we oversaw one detail, which was the stucco color. Should we discuss that now while we're together, or is it too late now?
Yeah, submit for administrative
Okay.
approval, and we'll just update it. Otherwise, we would want to,
Thing for you.
we would want to see the board would have to update the motion. They would need to see the color swatch.
Okay, but that's typically something that can be done administratively?
Yes, and it would have to be, there would have to be administrative approval that followed it anyway, even if the board said yes. So,
Oh, great.
cover it then.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good luck with your project.
Okay, that concludes our cases. Our next item are discussion items. Are there
Counts?
Yes.
I wanted to correct something I said earlier. It doesn't change the legal significance of what I said. The question came up that if there are 4 board members and one is acting as the chair and there are only 3 board members to vote, can a project be approved on a 2-to-1 vote? And I said previously this question came up when you were an acting chair. And actually, I went back and looked at the record on that, and that was on April 12th, and you were absent as well, so I correct myself. You were not the acting chair. Actually, Member Guida was the acting chair. And there was a project, I think it was the outdoor, let's see here, it was an outdoor seating area on Palace Avenue, and there were 4 H board members present. Member Guida was the acting chair. Flynn Larson, Jennifer Beechide, and John Bienvenu were the voting members. That project passed on a 2-to-1 vote, and I looked up at the request of my boss, Aaron McSherry, what the authority was for that. Since Anthony Guida was the chair, my opinion was that he could not vote except for break a tie per Article 11.2b of Resolution number 2009-20, which reads that he can only vote to break a tie but not to create a tie. Robert's Rules of Order, Section 4:56, also supports that the chair should not vote to protect his impartial position. That application was at 22 West Marcy Street, the La Boca Cafe, and that Robert's Rules of Order, Section 40:1 reads, a quorum refers to the number of members present, not to the number actually voting on a particular question. So therefore, 3 members are permitted to vote, even though by themselves they would not create a quorum, because we had a quorum because there were 4 members present. So therefore, a project can pass on a split vote of 2-to-1. So I believe there is support in that, both in the resolution 2009-20 as well as Robert's Rules of Order. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So that's our discussion items. Matters from the board. Okay, I have one more matter, and that is to say thank you, Melissa. You were here when I was city attorney. You've been here all the time that I've been on the board, and I really, really appreciate all you do. Thank you.
I appreciate you too. I wanted to tell you that when the meeting was over, but I appreciate everything you ever did for me when I worked for you. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Next meeting is Tuesday, August 23rd, 2022, and we are adjourned. Thank you.